Coming up, what did the youth for Brooklyn have to say on Media Day, and how does the fan base feel about some bravado in proving the rest of the NBA wrong? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that you can continue the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel by placing your first $5 bet and receiving $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, as we close out the Media Day session and turn towards the preseason games that'll be coming for Brooklyn, is there a difference for you as we look at some of the young players in Brooklyn and maybe the way that they talk about what could be a very long season ahead?
Well, I think it's cool, and you got an idea of this from Media Day, that like a lot of these young players do recognize that this is maybe kind of a once in a lifetime chance for them on like the NBA level, because, or for a couple of these guys who are maybe on their second tour of trying to get a really good chance. A second time in a lifetime chance, but they all recognize that this team, probably more than any other team in the NBA, is going to offer an opportunity for them to just show out if they can do it, right? Like no other team, and this is the one dream for tanking teams, especially on the player level, is that you often do not get a chance to just even like get legitimate playing time just because everyone knows that other situations you're just trying to win and everyone's just super dialed in. Here it's different because the Nets are taking some cast offs, because the Nets are not really all that interested in winning, because the Nets are probably going to trade a bunch of veterans here at some point in the season, and because they have a new coach who seems great, right? And has like a good track record already, like on the international scene and as an assistant coach. Like this is kind of like a crazy great opportunity for either players that are trying to break through or players like Killian Hayes, like Ziaire Williams, that just didn't hit the first time around, but might have a second chance this time. And I think it's really cool. I think from that perspective, I think this is one of the things we're really looking at this season.
Yeah, it is. It is fun to watch players, as you say, that maybe felt like in a lot of ways they were either in NBA purgatory when it comes to a guy like Ziaire Williams, who we'll get into some of his quotes where it just talks about what it feels like being in Brooklyn versus what was going on for him in Memphis. And then in Killian Hayes' case, who wasn't even in the NBA and was trying to figure out whether or not he was going to be able to have an opportunity to kind of reset himself. And I liked his quote when they talked about, obviously, the 7th overall pick back in 2020. He said, definitely feels like a restart, something that's refreshing, something that's new, and treating it like a second draft kind of. I did my first 4 years, and then just coming here is just something new, brings you energy, learning from different people. And you even mentioned the part about Jordi Fernandez and the organization overall. Listen, whatever has not gone well for this team, it at least does seem like even Kevin Durant, after his exits, like most players that leave the organization, I say most because there are caveats, where both sides, did not handle things gracefully. But for the most part, players do seem to like the organization, love the facility, love the medical staff, like the training staff. Like it does seem like the Nets organization is still a well-regarded or liked place to be a part of. And when you come into a year when you're only supposed to win 18 or 19 games, I think it does matter that it's different than, not to put it on them, Detroit, where it often feels like you are kind of being sent off to play out some type of sentence in one of the league's worst teams that even in their best intentions can never seem to get out of their own way. The Nets have been a team that has risen and fallen over the years and offers some optimism, I think, for young talent.
Yeah, look, maybe we get 3 years into the tank and people are like, and be like, hey, it does kind of feel like
it's the new Pistons. How are you?
Yeah, like, because, it's hard to compare because the Nets went on this correct trajectory where they get KD and Kyrie, right? They get Harden. They're in a championship window. Very few teams get to that point. And so in some ways, basing the previous 4 years, even for all the problems, of which there were obviously so many,
Numerous.
Don't need to do a full referendum on that, but even factoring that in, the Nets were just on a totally different path. And so, to some level, comparing them to Detroit, let's say in the Killian Hayes piece, or Memphis to some degree with Ziaire, like the part where we compare them is a little unfair to the Pistons because the Nets just were on a different path now. And that being said, the Pistons have been so bad for so long, and the Nets did shoot their shot. They missed, but they shot it, and a lot of teams can't even get to that point. So there is this sort of organizational structure that does, I think, on some level, give you hope that they can sort of do it again, right? Different path, but at least for Sean Marks, he's there. There has been a brain drain in the front office with a lot of these other guys getting picked off and going and going other places. That's a problem. He has not, since Kenny Atkinson, hired a coach that anyone wants them to coach the team, right? And so that's a problem. So there are other issues here. If you think Jordi Fernandez solves it, it sure feels different with him. I will say with him, it feels different than with Nash, with Jacques Vaughn. Ollie, it's like unfair. He was barely there, right? But it does feel different with Jordi Fernandez. And I think if you're a young player, like we said with Hayes or we said with Ziaire, and there's a lot of other guys, Keon Johnson. There's other guys here that are that fit into this mold. You have to feel, I think, a little confident about that situation from a stability standpoint, even for a team that's going to lose a crazy number of games this year. It's a very weird sort of world they're living in.
And just on that side note on Jordi Fernandez, to your point, we don't know. We're going to find out if he's the right coach and if it fits and if it works. It does feel different. And it mostly feels different because it seems like maybe for the first time, there's an understanding of expectations and goals. And it does feel more like everybody inside the organization is all pushing in the same direction, whether it's about Steve Nash being brought in and saying, you're the head coach. Sort of in title only. Or it's Jacques Vaughn and saying, well, what is...
Real quick, sorry to interrupt you here, but remember, it was, you're the head coach, and then Kyrie instantly came out and said, but we're all kind of the coach. Right?
We all get it. We get that, right? Fellas? Nobody?
So
just
great.
me? All right. Awesome. We'll see you on the court. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
You want to know, but that's the perfect example when it comes to the head coaching. And by the way, this is on Sean Marks and on the organization. If you bring in a guy like this, you cannot then kind of give off the vibe of, well, if some of our players want to be coaches too, I guess that's cool. Jacques Vaughn, familiar to millions, but also has taken this team through, took this team through a bad journey. They bring him back around. Even in his time there, then it was Cam Thomas. Are we developing him? Do we like him? Do we hate his guts? Are we sure that we know what we want to do with him? And then you obviously have the swap outs, the veterans, the other players that get brought in from the trades. And to your point, I leave Kevin Ollie off to the side. I think Kevin Ollie, good for you to have enough self-confidence to have the Nets give you a job that they were never going to let you keep, but still come into it with an attitude of, hey, I'm going to try to accomplish something before I get sent out the door. So it does feel like that side of it, whether it translates through on young player quotes and new guys that have come in the building here at Media Day, it does feel like the Nets have used this as an opportunity to reset the roster, but maybe also reset the organizational communication, let's say, chain of command, and making sure in top to bottom, they're all on the same page. Coming up here in a second, what are the expectations maybe for some of these young players? And also, what did key veterans that did not get traded away, like Cam Johnson, have to say about the season ahead? We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, if you're trying to find tickets these days, you want the ticket buying experience to be easy. Maybe you're going to the game, you're going to the theater, you're going to the concert, the comedy show. There's so many things to go to these days, especially if you're in the New York City area. You want to make you want to make the ticket buying experience as easy and as frankly affordable as possible. This is where Gametime picks can step in. They're going to filter out the fluff, showing the incredible deals, great seats. You're not going to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You go over to Gametime right now. It is absolutely popping off in New York right now. You got Oasis coming in here on Sunday. Those tickets are a little pricey, $188, but these guys don't come around ever so often. You got the ALDS with the Yankees starting at $129. The Mets in the playoffs too. It's all there for you over on Gametime. Look, you're going to be able to see exactly what you see when you sit down with the seat views. You can get super deals. You're going to get curated deals, make it easier to find the best prices on great seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we continue on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Media Day, talking about outlook for the season ahead, we have preseason games coming up here. And just as a reminder, we said this throughout the last couple of weeks and really through the summer, unlike other years, unlike when you're a championship caliber team, usually preseason means nothing. You're probably not going to play all your stars or any of your stars or any of your key contributors. Now for the Brooklyn Nets, you come into this, we talk about Killian Hayes, talk about Ziaire Williams. These are going to be guys that are actually going to be playing for their roles and for their jobs potentially on this team, which I think that is the part of it. Again, isolate the losing that's going to come here for the Brooklyn Nets this season. Isolate the motorcycles that want to, honk if you're excited for Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Love the motorcycle. Love the motorcycle. Like, hey, make it as loud as possible, friends. Like, that's
just
it.
On a side note, listen, it's Fan Take Friday, and I'm a fan of just life in general. Nothing is more useless than motorcycles. I want people to know this. There's no reason for anyone to own that. And God, I hope I'm not striking a chord with a segment of the fan.
You're gonna get some comments on that one. I would useless. For sure. Hey, buddy, it's okay. We ride or die together. I'm motorcycle. Yeah.
Bottom line, when we talk about those two players, though, having that opportunity to reset themselves, do you look at either one of them in Hayes and in Williams in this preseason and say, oh, one of these guys could jump into the top 15 category, could jump into, I can vision them maybe being in the 2 year ago role of Trendon Watford when they first bring him in, he's playing 7 to 10-ish minutes. It's not consistent. It's a little sporadic, but at least he's on the bench and you're going to get to see him over the course of the season in some sample size.
Yeah, and look, these guys are different things because, Killian Hayes is not guaranteed right now. So, we don't even know if some of these guys are going to make the team. And I will answer that in 1 second, but I'll say you made a good point about this preseason. In some ways, maybe some fans don't want to hear this, especially if you're going over and buying tickets on Gametime. But this is one. I think we should see this season as sort of one long preseason, right? It's going to have sort of the same vibes to it, which is it's all just kind of figuring stuff out. So I actually, in some ways, it's not perfectly one-to-one, and that's overstating a little bit, obviously, or understating it a little bit. But I do think the vibes of it are going to be closer than we've ever seen in the past because the outcomes and the goals are so different, right? Preseason, you're trying to find out maybe who's going to make the team, who can stick, right? Who's going to end up in Long Island, who is going to get cut. I mean, to some degree, that's going to be the case for the whole season, especially as trades happen and whatnot. And Killian Hayes right now is not guaranteed to make it through the team. Zaire, pretty sure that money is guaranteed, but so it's a little bit of a different situation. With where they stand right now, in terms of will one of these guys hit? I mean, almost for sure. And the good news is too, really, when you're trying to figure out at times which guys can break through in a new situation, I'd always default to pedigree, right? If your pedigree had you at some point as a top 10 pick, then sometime pointed a lot of executives to think that you were going to make it in the NBA because you just wouldn't. And these guys, and at the time, again, remember, we talked about this a few days ago, but these guys weren't reaches either. They weren't crazy reaches into the top 10.
No.
They were talked about in these circles as being able to play at the NBA level with decent agreement around draft slot. And so if at some point that was the case, I'll always start there, usually because you have a couple things that other guys don't. Size, right? You can get drafted on size and athleticism just to start because you simply can't coach that into somebody. You can't coach size and length onto a player, right? And that's always going to hurt some of these other guys and why they're going to fall. But beyond that, something in the tape and something along your different stops, for Hayes, in Europe, and something pointed to the idea that you should be up there in this upper echelon of guys we want to have on our team for a long time and really take a shot at. And so I'd always default there in with guys you want to take chances on. We talked about this endlessly. Even when the team was good, we talked so long for years, honestly, about guys we wanted to target for the Nets to trade for, with a recurring theme of, hey, one time they were drafted pretty high and something's not working out. Let's go get these guys. We mentioned Kuminga and then he broke out. right? Like,
Yep.
okay, our bad. We mentioned Jalen Green before he broke out. Okay.
Huh.
Oops. Right.
Huh.
So this happens. We mentioned Okoro, not exactly the same, but guys who were drafted in near, higher in the first round. So it's been a theme for us as a show to want to talk about these guys, especially in the Nets position where before they had every draft pick in the world, trying to land on some of these guys. So long story long, yeah, I can see one of these guys making it just because the past would tell you at some point a lot of other smart people in the NBA thought they could make it also.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you think about these two players in particular, just by the position you want to, as you mentioned, though, non-guaranteed contract for Hayes. You want to look at him and say, oh, he can be that guy. Why? Because of the backcourt that is in Brooklyn right now, because the contracts that'll be coming off the books, because of the other positional needs that they have there. You could say, hey, this is by far ever since the night he was drafted into the NBA, this is probably going to be the most critical week and a half stretch leading into the season of Killian Hayes' career since he first became an NBA player, because you could be writing the next handful of seasons for yourself going forward. If there's any team that's going to give you a chance where you could actually have that opportunity, Brooklyn's going to be that. On the Williams side of it, though, I will just note, talking about quotes coming out of media day, I feel like a bird finally let out of his cage. Some days in Memphis, I just kind of felt like I was trapped. I definitely feel a lot more free here. It's definitely a blessing in disguise. This is like, I think, just the other part of it for young players or players that feel like they burnt out with their first team and never got a good look. I'm sure there's some level of, why wasn't I getting more run? I am a talent. Yeah. I was regarded by everyone as being good enough. So it's not surprising that you also hear a little bit, and I hold nothing against Williams in this, a little bit of animosity around, it wasn't me. It was that, my former team would not give me the chance. That's a delicate balance. Unlike Hayes, who clearly has gone fully through the ringer and come out the other side going, it feels like a redraft for me and I get to start my career over. Williams seems like he's approaching this as, I'm about to show you why you missed out on not utilizing me more or finding a way to make me a part of that team with the Grizzlies.
Yeah, which you love to hear. Again, all of these guys our long mantra from the 17 years we've been doing the podcast, right, and the 48 years we've been following the Nets. Yeah. Decades and decades, is that you rarely can say the right thing at media day, but you can definitely say the wrong thing. Right?
The old adage.
That's we've all
it really is
long talk. We've been
I do nothing because we do use it often on the show.
Nothing but consistent with that take is that it's rare to make huge gains on media day, but you can for sure take huge losses. And I think, do you put a lot of stock in the front running nature of guys in their career at media day? No, of course not. But it also follows a parallel line with where these guys' career have gone. And I always like a guy, if you got a little bit of, I was treated wrong and I'm about to prove you wrong, I like that. Like that's a spot, the kind of player you kind of do want to target, because they're building their part of their career on being slighted. And we talked about yesterday, the irrational nature of professional athlete, like in their head, is you need to have it where that everyone hates you. And that's the drive. Everyone thinks you stink. I mean, obviously you don't, but everyone thinks you stink. And everyone's been out against you, and they've always said you couldn't do it, and all the stories everyone tells. Well, now if you have actually a tangible story to tell yourself, like you got cut by a team that drafted you, or they traded you away easily, or whatever, and you never got playing time, I mean, that is a real story to tell. And you walk into a new situation, new coach that has his stuff together, has coached really great players on the Canadian team, right? Yeah. That is such a feather in Jordi Fernandez's cap to be able to do that. So he's walked the walk, talk the talk with actual superstars, Murray, SGA, these guys that are on that team. Like that's just and that there's a possibility of playing time for yourself. That is a confidence boost. And so I do. It does ring out a little different. All right, we got a few more things to talk about here with some of these players still sitting around. Again, not all these guys are going to make it through, unfortunately, which is the other bummer of the situation. We'll get into that, a few more of these quotes here in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, FanDuel's America's number one sportsbook with NFL fans. You can start and continue the season with a big return on FanDuel. all you got to do is go over to FanDuel. Their sports betting stuff is second to none. You can get a hunch in the middle of the game. You check out the latest stats. You can view the live play-by-play. It's all on the same page where you make those bets. You can do in-game, same-game stuff over there. You can do player props. You can do first half, second half. This is sliced and diced it every which way when it comes to FanDuel. With FanDuel, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we wrap up today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Media Day, talking about young players, but also some veterans that obviously had some sentiments to convey around where they've been in the organization over the last couple of seasons and what it looks like going forward for them. I will say that to keep things on the light side, I also ran a couple of polls in our traditional Fan Take Friday, which we want people to keep being a part of. We'll continue to source those throughout the course of the season. I will say that there was this lighthearted one from Noah Clowney when he sat down at the podium. This isn't about his game. This isn't about anything else. To tell everybody when he sat down that he's weighing in at 230 pounds, but
Bam.
quote, with shoes on. So however you want to take that. He certainly, that is though 20 pounds. It would be heavier than he was at the beginning of last season. So just in terms of this isn't quote related. It's not, what we think is going to happen here. But for guys of his size, which we talked about when he came in, broad shoulders, the frame is there to put weight on. I think always the next question is, but will they, or how quickly will they be able to? So the fact that he's coming in anything, 10 pounds would have been nice. 15, 20 pounds is certainly going to help him in the entirety of his game. So I want to make sure at least at some point we mention one of the brightest young players that the Nets have on their roster coming out of Media Day. I feel like it's easy not to overlook him, but we already have expectations for him. We already think we know what his developmental track can look like this season. So he's coming into Media Day, though, and having a lot of fun with it as well.
Real quick on that, too. I appreciate him making the distinction that he keeps the shoes on, because any normal person takes the shoes right off. They step on the scale. They look at it. And they're like, what do these shoes weigh? 18 pounds? All right, let me just kick these off. Oh, maybe I'll take off everything I have. Yeah. And maybe I'll just do it. Like,
a couple quick wind sprints and then come back and check in.
Frankly, I find it aggressive that he would remind us that he puts the shoes on when he weighs himself. It's it's like sort of a microaggression against all of us that do it the opposite way.
Normal human beings battling on the other side of that equation.
Yeah, so I take it back. At first, I said I appreciated it. Actually, now I feel like I'm being aggressed against when it comes to how he's weighing himself. So take the shoes off, pal. Come on, do what everyone else.
There's some world where I think they should bench him. I don't know. We'll get back into that as the season unfolds here for the Brooklyn Nets. The other one here that I thought was just worth touching on is obviously Cam Johnson, because he comes in, he has the big contract, he has multiple years on the contract. And I don't know if this hit you in any other way than just being honest and direct, but he said when it came to the state of the team and the state of him on this team, I understand the business side of it. I'm kind of getting the hang of how this works. And for me, I just said it's never a hard feeling or anything that happens. I like Sean Marks a lot and appreciate Sean a lot. And that won't change when I was traded 2 months ago. That won't change if I get traded 2 months from now. That won't change if I remain in net the rest of my career. I let him know that first and foremost, and then after that, it was just let me know what's going on. And I think that this, again, for whatever you want to take it as, it's easier for the organization. It's easier for Sean Marks. It's easier with these level and caliber of players than with your superstars to actually be legitimately honest with them. We know what this looks like for us going into the season. You see the over-under win totals. If an opportunity comes up to trade you, we probably will look at that. If it doesn't look right for us, we're going to keep you here. Guess what? We already paid you as well. That's always something that makes it easier to get behind whatever decisions get made. Cam Johnson's comfortable in his contract. It's a little bit different for a player like Dorian Finney-Smith with his player option coming up. But I do think, again, I don't want to go all roses here, but it's easy for player and organization to have an open communication around, we see what this could potentially look like. It's all good. Just give me a heads up. If you're going to trade me, let me know. If it looks like there's a deal on the table, let me know. Otherwise, I'm here. I'll help Jalen Wilson get better. I'll help myself develop. Johnson also talked about area of his game that he continues to work on. And I think it makes it very easy, as Keon Johnson referenced, like the vibes within the locker room with all these guys. I think it's easy to all kind of have good energy, even going into a bad year, because it's all understood. It's very much above board in terms of where the organization is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure with lie detector tests, these guys, especially when the season starts, going to be like, why they want to get traded, right? If they have a chance to
Now,
go play
again,
for
it's
a
all
team.
honest, but 2 weeks into the year, that honesty will change. The tone of the honesty will feel different.
And I'm sure they've said, hey, we're actively trying to do this, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that behind the closed doors, they are saying, we don't plan on having you just sit and lose with us for the next few years.
Right.
You're rich either way, so good news there. But but in general, like these guys also, want to play to win. And I'm sure they just don't want to be in a team that has an 18.5 win total over under, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. So, like, if they're all just being honest, it's also easier to say this stuff now because you're not just going out there and getting torched every single game. Maybe they come out and play a little better and the team looks okay to start and it's a slightly different situation, but everyone knows how this is going to end, right? Everyone knows how this season's going to end. There's no way the Nets are going to jeopardize this draft class by winning a few extra games. That'd be insane. They're not going to do it. And so
by the way, my tone around the organizational, stability is going to shift if they start getting insane and winning a couple extra games.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Right. Like between the talent and just these guys going to get shipped off and all this other stuff. It just, to me, it's really not a risk. But in general, like these veterans, I would say they're saying the right things when it comes to this stuff, because I think it's weird. We've watched this from afar for other teams for a long time, and some of these tanking teams just have this air of just being an absolute S show, right? Around like what's going on. Let's just roll the balls out in the court and see what happens. You got just guys just out there running and gunning for their own stats. No one's listening to the coach. I don't get that sense from the Nets right now, and that is a good thing. So I think if you're a veteran, and I think Jordi Fernandez helps a ton here. It does feel like people respect Marks. We've had our problems with him over the years, and we've had our things we've thought he's done well. It does feel like people respect Marks. It does feel the New York City vibe helps for sure. Like, tanking in OKC is different than tanking in Brooklyn. Right. Just from a lifestyle perspective, like no doubt, being bad in some other place that just the city's not as good. So these things help. This helps the Nets. But I think just like there is like this weird air of stability, even for a team that clearly has a record low when it comes to projected win totals. And I think that does matter. And I think that probably stems from the GM and the coach and a couple other pieces that some of these other teams haven't had. So I'm not surprised to hear the veterans talk like this again when they're 5-20. Right. Or something like that. And let's see if the quotes still ring the same. Yeah. But as of right now, they don't have the air of a team that's headed for the dumpster, even though we all know where it's going. And I do find that like vibe to be interesting.
Yeah. Positive vibes. This isn't like this proverbial Titanic, but it's, positive vibes in the face of what is going to be a difficult situation. And you'd rather at least be at the forefront that everyone is on the same page, as opposed to getting some negative or, contradicting messages coming out of some of these players. Only last notes that I'll just throw in here is one that Nicholas Claxton said it was an easy decision to want to come back to Brooklyn. They've loved him since day one, wanted to be here, paraphrasing a little bit. But they asked him on the side, Frank Iasola, about, how'd that process work? Were you 100% certain it was going to be coming back to Brooklyn? Said, well, you're never certain. My agents and da-da-da-da. Like, there's still this world where it's like Nick Claxton, I think, in terms of being on script, understood that maybe there was an opportunity somewhere else. If it came up at the right price, he would have done it. The Nets were willing to commit to him. That's a good thing. It keeps him here. And then last but not least, I cannot leave without saying it. Day'Ron Sharpe wants people to know that 2 seasons ago, he shot over 50% from beyond the arc. He is determined to get that look back on court for him. He was nothing but the vibe of what you want from a young rebuilding team. Fun, energetic, excited to be here, looking at, what comes next for him. But he was having a ton of enthusiasm, I think, before he got tapped out by Dorian Finney-Smith to go take photos on media day. It was a lot of fun to watch that coverage.
I'm all for greenlighting Day'Ron Sharpe pick and pop 3-pointers from above the break, or just just those 3-pointers that he shot. I don't know. Looked all right to us. We always wanted a few more of them. So all
11 times, okay, we're gonna get 16 times in a year. Come on, let's get 20 of those bad boys up.
All right, we're gonna get out of here. Much appreciate everyone rocking with us through the off season. Look, preseason games right around the corner. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let's get over the 8,000 subscribers over there. So easy, free for you to do. Just subscribe wherever you listen.
And of course, all of the stars have faded away Just try not to worry. You'll see them someday. Stop crying your heart out. Why, that's Liam and frankly Noah Gallagher as well. Oasis.
Can I tell you something? I knew.
Go ahead, tell me about it.
Right when I said that Oasis thing for the Game Time read, that we were getting Oasis quote. This is what happens when you spend 10,000 hours talking to somebody about the Nets over the last few years. You just end up knowing exactly what one of the great, and usually it's one of the great all-time American poets, but these Brits.
I can tell by the alert going off. It's time to wrap.
Wrap it up, pal. That's what it just says. Wrap it up, pal. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Those guys from Oasis, some of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.